when the 15-year-old girl with shadows under her eyes and a perpetual dusting of flour on her worn-out sneakers started showing up for the morning shift at the Iron Skillet Diner on days she should have been in a classroom, the man in the corner booth began to notice. He was a biker, a man known only as Sticks, and his past as a firefighter had trained him to see the things that were wrong in a picture, the subtle signs of a fire before the smoke became obvious. The girl's presence was smoke. Her mother's sharp, possessive grip on her arm was the heat. And when the girl, in a fleeting moment of courage, slipped a folded napkin into his hand that contained just 2 desperate words, it was the alarm bell he could not ignore. That simple, silent plea set off a chain of events that would turn a routine Tuesday morning into a steel and leather standoff, proving that sometimes, the only person who can save you is the stranger who was paying attention. The Iron Skillet Diner was a place unstuck in time. It sat on the edge of town, a long, low building with a chrome facade that had seen better decades. Inside, the air was a permanent, comforting mix of frying bacon, brewing coffee, and the faint, sweet scent of pancake syrup. The vinyl on the booths was cracked like old leather, and the jukebox in the corner, though mostly silent, held the ghosts of 1,000 Saturday nights. For the members of the Iron Sentinels Motorcycle Club, it was neutral ground, a place to start the day or end a long ride. Among them, Sticks was the quietest. At 48, he was leaner than most of his brothers, built like a whipcord from years of hauling hoses and kicking down doors. His road name came from his early days as a drummer, a life he'd left behind long before he'd found the fire department, but the name stuck. His hair was more salt than pepper now, pulled back in a short, tight ponytail. His face was a roadmap of hard miles and harder sights, but his eyes, a clear, steady grey, missed nothing. He'd retired from the service a few years back after a roof collapse had left him with a permanent limp and a lungful of bad memories. The bike and the brotherhood of the Sentinels had given him a new purpose, a new rhythm to his days. His routine was simple. Coffee at the Iron Skillet every morning. The corner booth, facing the door. He liked to watch the world wake up. It was how he first noticed the girl. Her name, he learned from her mother's constant, sharp commands, was Maya. She couldn't have been more than 15, with a thin frame that seemed lost in the diner's oversized apron. She had long, dark hair she constantly had to push out of her face and eyes that were far too old for her years. They were the eyes of someone who had stopped expecting good things to happen. But she was a good worker. Quick, efficient, and silent. She refilled coffee cups without being asked, cleared plates with an economy of motion, and never, ever made a mistake with an order. She moved through the diner like a ghost, there but not quite. Her mother was another story. The woman, whose name was Sharon, was a storm cloud in a flowered dress. She didn't work, she supervised. She sat at the end of the counter, nursing a single cup of coffee for hours, her gaze following Maya's every move. Her voice was a constant, low reprimand, a stream of corrections and criticisms that never ceased. Wipe that table again, Maya, hurry up with that order, Maya, don't you dare spill that, Maya. Sticks saw it all from his corner booth. He saw the way Maya flinched every time her mother spoke. He saw the tight, white-knuckled grip Sharon kept on Maya's arm when she passed by the counter. He saw the way Maya's shoulders were permanently hunched, as if waiting for a blow that was always about to land. The first time he felt the deep, gut-level wrongness of it was a Tuesday. A school day. Maya was there at 7 in the morning, taking his order. Her eyes were heavy, her movements slow with exhaustion. He'd seen that same look on his own men after a 3-alarm fire that had lasted all night. It was the look of someone running on nothing but fumes. He'd asked her, casually, shouldn't you be getting ready for school? Before Maya could answer, Sharon was there, her smile as thin and brittle as spun sugar. She's homeschooled. We find practical experience is the best teacher. Sticks just nodded, but his internal alarm, the one honed by 2 decades of life-or-death decisions, was ringing loud and clear. He knew a lie when he heard one. The girl's hands, gripping a coffee pot, were trembling. There were no textbooks in her worn backpack by the door, just a change of clothes. The excuse was too quick, too polished. It was a shield. He started paying closer attention. He saw Maya working Wednesday morning. And the next Monday. She was there more often than she was not, always under the watchful, predatory eye of her mother. He saw Sharon collect all of Maya's tips at the end of each shift, stuffing the crumpled bills into her purse without a word of thanks, her expression one of grim entitlement. Styx had been a firefighter long enough to know the different kinds of fear. There was the hot, panicked fear of a person trapped in a burning building. There was the cold, sharp fear of a rookie on their first real call. And then there was the quiet, simmering fear of a child in a bad situation. It was a fear that settled deep in the bones, a fear that learned not to make a sound. He saw that fear in Maya. He knew what a scared kid looked like. He'd carried them out of smoke-filled rooms, their small bodies limp in his arms. He'd sat with them on curbsides, wrapped in blankets, while their worlds turned to ash behind them. He recognized the landscape of her face. It was a map of silent endurance, of a battle being fought every single day behind a wall of quiet compliance. Other patrons saw a tired teenager and her overbearing mother. The diner owner, a man named Sal who was more concerned with his bottom line than his employees' welfare, saw a cheap, efficient worker. They saw the surface. Styx, trained to look for the structural weaknesses, for the source of the heat, saw the whole, horrifying picture. The girl wasn't just working a job, she was serving a sentence. He began to change his routine. He'd stay longer, order another coffee he didn't need, just to be a silent presence in the room. He wanted the girl to know someone was watching. Not like her mother watched, with judgment and control, but with a quiet, protective stillness. He wanted her to feel it, to know that she was not invisible. For weeks, nothing changed. The grim pantomime continued day after day. Maya would work, Sharon would watch, and Styx would observe, the coil of tension in his gut winding tighter with each passing morning. He felt helpless, a man of action trapped in a state of observation. He couldn't just call the authorities with a suspicion. He needed a signal. He needed a sign from Maya herself that she wanted help. The signal came on a drizzly Tuesday morning. The diner was slow. Maya was clearing his table, her movements as silent and weary as ever. Sharon was at the counter, distracted for a rare moment, arguing with Sal about the delivery schedule. It was a small window, maybe 30 seconds. As Maya reached for his empty coffee cup, her fingers brushed against his hand. It was a fleeting, almost accidental touch, but it was electric. Her hand was cold. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the table, but her message was clear. She leaned in, as if to wipe a spot on the table, and her voice was a bare whisper, almost lost in the hiss of the coffee machine. "She's not my mom," she breathed. "She's my aunt. She took me when my mom passed. She takes my checks." Then she was gone, moving toward the kitchen. But she left something behind. A neatly folded napkin sat beside his plate, one that hadn't been there a moment before. His heart hammered against his ribs. He waited until she was out of sight, then carefully picked it up. His large, calloused fingers, more used to gripping an axe handle or the handlebars of his Harley, felt clumsy. He unfolded it under the table. The words were written in blue pen, the letters shaky but clear. "Help me." The blood in his veins went cold. It was the same feeling he'd had standing outside a fully engulfed house, knowing people were still inside. It was the moment before the breach, the instant where observation ended and action began. The alarm was screaming now. There was no more waiting. There was no more watching. The two simple words on that flimsy piece of paper were not a request. They were a command. And Styx had spent his entire life answering calls for help. This would be no different. The decision was not a decision at all. It was an inevitability, a foregone conclusion the moment he read those words. The risk of being wrong, of causing a scene, of social embarrassment, it all evaporated like mist. All that mattered was the terrified girl in the oversized apron and the two words she had scrawled on a napkin. He folded the piece of paper carefully and tucked it into the pocket of his leather vest, over his heart. It felt as heavy as a stone. He threw a $20 bill on the table, more than enough for his coffee, and stood up. His limp was more pronounced when he was agitated. He walked to the door, feeling Sharon's suspicious eyes on his back, but he didn't look at her. His focus was singular. He pushed the door open, the little bell above it chiming, and stepped out into the damp morning air. He didn't get on his bike. Not yet. He walked to the payphone at the edge of the parking lot, a relic, but one that couldn't be traced as easily as a cell call. He dialed a number he knew by heart. It was the private cell of a detective he'd worked with for years, a good man named Miller. "Sticks," Miller's voice answered, gruff with surprise. "Everything okay? I need you to run a name for me." "Sharon Peterson." "Anna Minor, Meyer. Last name might be different. They're at the Iron Skillet Diner on Route 4. I think the kid is in trouble." He explained the situation in clipped, efficient sentences. The long hours, the school days, the fear in the girl's eyes. The note. "I'll start digging," Miller promised. "But Sticks, be careful. Don't go in half-cocked. Let us handle it. I just need to make sure she doesn't leave with the kid before you get here," Sticks said, his voice low and hard. "I'll be careful." He hung up and went back to his bike. He didn't start it. He just sat, his helmet on the seat beside him, watching the diner's front door. He sent a single text to his MC president, Duke. "Iron Skillet. Need backup. Not a fight. Just a waltz." Within 10 minutes, the low, throaty rumble of approaching motorcycles filled the air. 3 bikes pulled into the lot, Duke in the lead. They parked in a semicircle behind Sticks, their engines idling for a moment before cutting out, leaving a sudden, heavy silence. Duke, a mountain of a man with a thick grey beard, walked over. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He saw the look on Sticks' face. "What's the play?" Duke asked, his voice a low gravel. "The woman and the girl inside. They'll be coming out soon. The girl, Maya, she's the one we're here for. When they come out, we just block their car. No threats, no violence. We just become a temporary inconvenience until the police arrive." Duke nodded, understanding completely. A wall it is. They waited. The minutes stretched out, thick with tension. Sticks watched the door, his senses on high alert. He could feel the familiar adrenaline beginning to course through him, the focused calm that always settled over him before a crisis. He was no longer a retired firefighter having coffee. He was on the job. If you believe in protecting the innocent, hit that hype button and show your support. Finally, the diner door opened. Sharon came out first, her purse clutched in her hand. She had Maya by the upper arm, her fingers digging in, pulling the girl along. Maya kept her head down, her dark hair hiding her face. They headed for a beat-up, rust-colored sedan parked near the side of the building. "Now," Sticks said quietly. As one, the 4 men started their engines. The roar of 4 Harley-Davidsons shattered the morning quiet. Sticks led the way, rolling his bike slowly, deliberately, directly in front of the sedan, blocking its path. Duke and the other 2 sentinels flanked him, forming an impenetrable barrier of chrome and steel. They cut their engines again, and the silence that returned was more menacing than the noise. Sharon stopped dead, her hand tightening on Maya's arm. Her face, a mask of confusion, quickly hardened into anger. "What do you think you're doing? Get out of our way." Stick swung a leg off his bike and stood, using the machine for support. He didn't move closer. He just stood there, a solid, immovable object. "We're just waiting," he said, his voice calm and even. "Waiting for what?" "I've got places to be," she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. She tried to pull Maya around the bikes, but the other sentinels shifted, blocking her path without a word. "You're in our way," she spat, her eyes darting between the 4 large men. Fear was starting to creep into her voice, replacing the anger. "This is harassment. I'm calling the police." "No need," Stick said, looking past her. "They're already here." 2 police cruisers, lights flashing but sirens silent, pulled into the parking lot, blocking the only exit. Detective Miller got out of the first car, his expression grim. A uniformed officer and a woman in plain clothes, who Styx recognized as a social worker, got out of the second. The confrontation was swift and decisive. Sharon's blustering rage dissolved into panicked lies as Miller approached her. We've had a report concerning the welfare of this child. We need to ask you both a few questions. This is my daughter. We were just leaving. Sharon insisted, trying to shield Maya behind her. But her grip had loosened. It was the opening Maya needed. In a sudden, desperate move, she twisted out of her aunt's grasp and ran. She didn't run toward the police. She ran toward Styx. She stumbled to a halt behind the solid barrier of his motorcycle and clutched the back of his leather vest, burying her face in the thick material, her small body trembling with sobs of terror and relief. Styx didn't move. He just stood there, a human shield, his hand resting gently on her head. He could feel her tears soaking through his shirt. The social worker, a kind-faced woman named Maria, approached slowly. "It's okay, Maya," she said softly. "You're safe now." Miller's investigation was brutally efficient. He had already discovered that Sharon Peterson was Maya's legal guardian, but he had also discovered the truth about the homeschooling. Sharon had been cashing Social Security survivor benefit checks meant for Maya's education and welfare for over 2 years, all while forcing the girl to work grueling hours at the diner to supplement her own income. She had forged attendance records and filed false reports. The school district had her listed as a chronic truant, with notices unanswered and calls unreturned. Sharon Peterson was arrested on the spot for fraud, child endangerment, and unlawful imprisonment. As she was led to the cruiser in handcuffs, still shouting threats and denials, she looked less like a storm cloud and more like what she was, a petty, cruel woman whose world had just collapsed. The threat was neutralized. The predator was caged. And in the quiet aftermath, as the police cars pulled away, Maya was still huddled behind Styx, clinging to his vest as if it were a life raft. The rescue was complete. With the flashing lights gone and the drama subsided, the parking lot of the Iron Skillet returned to a semblance of normalcy, yet everything had changed. Sal, the diner owner, hovered nervously by the door, wringing his hands, now offering free coffee and anything else they wanted. Styx ignored him. His focus was entirely on the trembling girl behind him. Detective Miller walked over, his face etched with a mixture of weariness and gratitude. He clapped a hand on Styx's shoulder. "Your instincts were dead on, my friend. We've been getting flags from the school for months, but she was good at covering her tracks. If you hadn't made this call, who knows how long this would have gone on." He looked down at Maya, his expression softening. "You did a good thing here, Styx." "A very good thing." Styx simply nodded, the praise making him uncomfortable. He hadn't done it for thanks. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. The social worker, Maria, knelt down to be on eye level with Maya. "Maya," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "we're going to take you somewhere safe now. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Maya finally let go of Styx's vest and turned, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. She looked from Maria back to Styx, a universe of fear and hope swirling in her gaze. Styx knew this was a critical moment. He walked over to the diner's entrance. "Sal, get me a hot chocolate. And put a shot of whipped cream on it." Sal, eager to be helpful, scurried away to comply. Styx took the warm mug and brought it to Maya, crouching down so he wasn't towering over her. He held it out. "Here," he said gruffly. "You look like you could use this." She took the mug with both hands, the warmth seeming to seep into her. She took a small, hesitant sip. For the first time that morning, a flicker of something other than fear crossed her face. It was the first small step toward healing, a simple cup of hot chocolate symbolizing a return to the childhood that had been stolen from her. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You were in the corner booth every morning," he confirmed. "I saw you," she said. "I didn't think anyone else did." "I didn't think anyone cared." "We care," Styx said, gesturing with his head toward Duke and the other sentinels, who stood by their bikes, a silent, watchful honor guard. "Sometimes people just need a little help to see." Maya took another sip of her drink, then looked him straight in the eye. The words she said next were the only thanks he would ever need. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me," he just nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He reached into his vest and pulled out the folded napkin. He held it out to her. She took it, looked at the 2 words she had written, and then slowly, deliberately, tore it into tiny pieces. The wind caught them and scattered them across the wet asphalt. The plea had been answered. It was no longer needed. Maria gently guided Maya toward her car, a blanket already waiting on the back seat. Before she got in, Maya turned one last time and gave Styx a small, watery smile. It was the first time he had ever seen her smile, and it was like watching the sun break through the clouds. 2 years passed. The Iron Skillet Diner was still there, but a lot had changed. Sal had sold it to a young family who brightened the place up, and the food was better. Styx still went for his morning coffee, still sat in the corner booth. But now, when he looked out the window, the world seemed a little brighter. Maya was thriving. After a few months in a temporary foster home, Maria had managed to track down her maternal grandmother, a woman who had been told that Maya and her mother had moved out of state and left no forwarding address. The reunion had been tearful and joyous. Now living in a stable, loving home, Maya had blossomed. The quiet, fearful girl was gone, replaced by a confident, articulate young woman who was at the top of her class and the star of the school's debate team. She was catching up on the life she had nearly lost. She and Styx had formed an unlikely, unbreakable bond. She called him every Sunday afternoon, without fail, to tell him about her week, her triumphs in debate, her struggles with algebra, the boy she had a crush on. He was no longer just her rescuer, he was her mentor, her friend, her rock. He listened more than he talked, offering quiet advice and unwavering support. He was the steadiest presence in her life. The incident had changed the Iron Sentinel's MC as well. It had awakened something in them, a renewed sense of purpose beyond their weekend rides and clubhouse camaraderie. Inspired by Maya's story, Duke and Styx had spearheaded a new initiative. They established a non-profit foundation called Maya's Ride, dedicated to providing scholarships and emergency funds for at-risk youth in their community. Their annual charity ride, once just a local event, became a major fundraiser, drawing bikers from 3 states. They weren't just a club anymore, they were a force for good, a network of guardians watching over the kids who might otherwise fall through the cracks. On a bright, sunny Saturday in June, Styx wasn't at the diner. He was sitting in the front row of the high school auditorium, his leather vest cleaned and polished, sitting awkwardly amongst the proud parents and grandparents. He watched as Maya, dressed in a cap and gown, walked across the stage to receive her diploma, graduating with honors. When her name was called, he stood up and clapped louder than anyone, a rare, wide grin splitting his weathered face. After the ceremony, she found him outside, pushing through the crowd to throw her arms around him in a fierce hug. "I did it, Styx," she cried, her voice muffled against his vest. "You sure did, kid," he said, his voice thick with pride. Never had a doubt, she pulled back, her eyes shining. "I'm only here because of you. Because you took the time to look. My scholarship from Maya's Ride is going to pay for my first year of college. I'm going to study social work. I want to be like Maria. I want to help kids like me." The ripple effect of his actions that day in the parking lot had become a tidal wave of positive change, touching lives he would never even know. Later that afternoon, Styx sat in his booth at the Iron Skillet, a piece of celebratory cake in front of him. He looked at the napkin holder on the table, and for a moment, he could almost see the ghost of those 2 words, "help me." It was a reminder that the world is full of quiet pleas and silent screams, and that heroism often isn't about running into burning buildings. Sometimes, it's just about paying attention. It's about seeing the person everyone else looks right through and having the courage to stop and ask if they're okay. It's about being a wall when someone needs one, and a safe harbor in a storm. He took a bite of cake and smiled. The fire was out. The victim was safe. The job was done.